All right, let's dive into one of literature's biggest head-scratchers, Anton Chekhov. You probably know him for writing some of the most profound, soul-crushing plays ever written. But what if I told you he thought they were something else entirely? Yep, you heard that right. Chekhov, the absolute master of existential dread and quiet suffering, insisted that his great works were comedies. It's a claim that has been confusing actors, directors, and audiences for more than 100 years. I mean, think about it. His characters are trapped. They're dreaming of lives they'll never, ever have. They often end up even worse off than when the play started. So, what gives? Where exactly is the punchline in all that misery? Let's figure this out. To solve this riddle, we really need to get to know the man behind the plays. Because Chekhov wasn't just a writer. He had this whole other career that gave him a totally unique lens on what it means to be human. Chekhov's life was just full of these incredible contrasts. I mean, he was the grandson of a serf who grows up to become this super respected doctor and literary star. He travels for 3 grueling months by carriage, think about that, across Siberia just to document the lives of prisoners. And his life doesn't end with some big, profound speech. Nope. It ends with a simple, almost elegant request, a glass of champagne. This mix of hard reality and a kind of grace, that's the key to his work. And that dual identity, it's everything. You just can't understand Chekhov the writer without understanding Chekhov the doctor. You see, his medical training wasn't just his 9 to 5, it was the bedrock of his entire artistic method. Just look at how beautifully this lines up. A doctor observes a patient's symptoms, right, to make a diagnosis. Well, Chekhov did the exact same thing with his characters. He watched how they behaved, he diagnosed their spiritual and social sicknesses, and then he presented his findings with this cold, clinical objectivity. He completely avoided telling you who to root for. And this was his whole philosophy, really. He had zero interest in telling the audience who was good or who was evil, or how they ought to live their lives. His job, as he saw it, was to just hold up a mirror and show us life exactly as it is, with all its messy, unresolved problems. He was, in a way, a diagnostician of the human soul. So as you can imagine, this clinical approach led to a totally new and kind of radical kind of theater. When his plays first came out, a lot of critics found them, well, a little boring. They just felt like nothing was happening. And that's because Chekhov was purposefully stripping away all this stuff people expected from a drama. And this comparison just lays it all out. Traditional theater, it gives you sword fights and big declarations of love and obvious heroes. Chekhov? He gives you people having tea, complaining about the weather, and dreaming about moving to Moscow. He swapped all that big external action for the huge internal drama of just living an ordinary life. So you have to realize the fact that these things are missing isn't a bug, it's the feature. Chekhov was convinced that real life doesn't have neat little endings or mustache-twirling villains. It's way more complicated, quieter, and messier than that. He was an absolute master at showing how the most heartbreaking, life-shattering moments can happen while someone 2 feet away is just humming a tune, totally oblivious. In his play 3 Sisters, while the sisters are literally weeping over their shattered dreams, there's a nanny just pushing a stroller in the background. Life just keeps going on. That painful, awkward reality was his signature move. Okay, so we've got it. His plays are realistic, they're sad, not a lot happens. Which brings us right back to our big mystery. Where in the world is the comedy? Well, to find the answer, we have to look somewhere pretty unexpected, 20th century French philosophy. So there's this philosopher, Henri Bergson, who had this really brilliant idea about what makes us laugh. He argued that laughter isn't really an emotion like joy. It's more of an intellectual thing, like a social alarm bell that goes off in our brains when we see something that just doesn't compute. Here's the core of it. Life is fluid. It's always changing, and it demands that we adapt. Humans are supposed to be flexible. So when we see a person acting like a mindless robot, stuck in some rigid pattern, even though the whole world is changing around them, the sheer absurdity of it strikes us as funny. It's like we're laughing at a glitch in the system. Bergson used this great example. Imagine a bunch of shipwreck survivors wash up on the shore. They're half dead. A customs official runs over, and instead of helping them, he just robotically asks anything to declare. Now, nobody's feeling happy in that moment, but the total absurdity of his machine-like behavior in a life-or-death situation, it's darkly hilarious. He just can't adapt. And that, right there, is Chekhov's comedy. His characters are all just tragically stuck. They're life's shipwreck survivors. When they're faced with a crisis that demands new action, they just keep repeating their old lines, stuck in their old routines. They talk and talk and talk about going to Moscow, but they never ever pack a bag. The joke is that giant, tragic, and absurd gap between what life is asking of them and their complete inability to change. So, by diagnosing this universal human flaw, this stuckness, Chekhov didn't just write a couple of great plays. No, he fundamentally rewired modern drama and storytelling. His influence today is, well, it's everywhere. I mean, his focus on what's going on inside a character's head, that inspired the entire method school of acting. His clean, objective writing style influenced generations of writers, from Hemingway to Virginia Woolf. Basically, any story you read today that focuses on quiet desperation and unspoken feelings, it owes a huge debt to him. It's no exaggeration. You've got the ancient Greeks, you've got Shakespeare, and you've got Chekhov. He's one of the true pillars of Western theater. So you see, Chekhov's diagnosis wasn't just for people in 19th century Russia. He was diagnosing something permanent about all of us. And it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, when life demands that we adapt, do we actually do it? Or do we, just like his characters, keep repeating our old lines, totally stuck in a play of our own making? That's the tragic comedy he saw. And if we're being honest, we might just see it in ourselves too. Today, we're diving into one of the most important plays ever written, Anton Chekhov's The Seagull. Now, this story is absolutely packed with messy love triangles, artistic jealousy, and some serious family drama. But the biggest question, the one that hangs over the entire play, has always been about its title. Seriously, why name a play that's so completely focused on human struggle after a bird? Well, that is the mystery we're going to solve today. And it turns out that title is the key that unlocks everything Chekhov was trying to say about art, love, and, well, life itself. So let's get into it. Okay, so picture this. We're on a beautiful but kind of sleepy Russian country estate. It's the perfect setting for all these simmering tensions and secret desires to finally boil over. And we're focused on four people whose lives are about to get very, very tangled up. First up, you've got Arkadina. She's a famous actress who's pretty vain and desperately clinging to her fame. Then there's her son, Treplev. He's a young, brooding writer who wants to create bold new art and just get out from under his mother's shadow. He is completely in love with Nina, this sweet, aspiring actress who lives next door. And stirring the pot is Trigorin, who is Arkadina's lover and a super successful novelist, but he's pretty bored with his own success. So what really drives this play isn't some big dramatic plot. Nope, it's this chaotic, really painful daisy chain of unrequited love. Almost nobody loves the person who loves them back, which, as you can imagine, creates this pressure cooker of quiet desperation. Now take a look at this, because this chart just lays out all the heartbreak perfectly. It's a mess. Masha, who's the estate manager's daughter, is hopelessly in love with Treplev. But of course, Treplev only has eyes for Nina. Nina, in turn, gets completely infatuated with the older, more famous Trigorin. And Trigorin, well, he's technically with Arkadina, but he's easily flattered by all the attention from Nina. You see what I mean? It's just a perfect storm of misery. This one line, it captures the mood of the entire play. When someone asks Masha why she always wears black, she doesn't say it's for a person who died. She says, I am in mourning for my life. She's just unhappy, and she's accepted that as her reality. And honestly, it's a feeling that secretly haunts just about every single character in this story. So we've got all this very human, very messy drama, which brings us right back to our big question. Where the heck does the seagull come in? Let's track its journey, because it goes from being a literal bird to a really powerful, constantly changing symbol. And just a quick refresher for all of us, a symbol in literature isn't just a thing. Think of it more like a key that unlocks the hidden layers of a story. A A single object can mean a bunch of different things, sometimes even contradictory things. And in this play, the seagull is the master key. So the meaning of this symbol actually grows and changes in three main stages. It starts when Treplov, who's frustrated with his art and his love for Nina, just senselessly shoots a seagull and throws it at her feet. It's this weird, destructive gesture. Then Trigorin, the writer, sees the dead bird and it gives him an idea for a story. He says, imagine a man comes along, sees a free, happy young girl, like a seagull, and just because he has nothing better to do, destroys her. He's literally writing out his own future actions with Nina. And then, finally, after he does exactly that, seduces her, gets her pregnant, and abandons her, Nina returns, totally broken, and finally understands. She tells Treplov, I am the seagull. And if you needed any more proof of what kind of guy Trigorin is, this is it. He actually has that seagull stuffed as a trophy. But 2 years later, when he sees the stuffed bird, he can't even remember asking for it. This one tiny detail shows you everything. It shows how little he cares about the lives he ruins. To him, Nina was just a passing fancy, a story idea, a trophy to be stuffed and then completely forgotten. All right, now get ready for the biggest twist of all. Despite all the misery, the affairs, and a suicide that literally ends the play, Anton Chekhov was absolutely insistent about one thing. The Seagull is a comedy. How on earth can that be true? Okay, to get this, you have to realize that Chekhov's idea of comedy wasn't about jokes or punchlines. He was basically redefining the whole genre. See, traditional tragedy is all about big, heroic people making huge, fatal choices. But Chekhov's comedy is about normal people who are basically paralyzed. They can't act. Their drama isn't some noble downfall. It's the absurd, kind of pathetic gap between their big dreams and their boring reality. The dark humor here comes from watching these characters complain and dream and talk on and on about how they're going to change their lives while doing absolutely nothing. They are so wrapped up in their own little dramas that they can't see how ridiculous they look. And that, for Chekhov, was the great, sad comedy of being human. But The Seagull wasn't just some powerful story. It was a total revolution for the theater. With this one play, Chekhov basically broke all the old rules and created the blueprint for what we now call modern drama. Yeah, he pretty much threw out the entire rulebook. Instead of big dramatic speeches, he gave us subtext, all this stuff that's happening beneath the surface. It's when a character says, the weather is lovely, but what they really mean is, I hate you and I want to leave. He used these long, awkward silences to build crazy amounts of tension, and he hated neat, tidy endings. The big tragic suicide at the end, it happens off stage, and someone just mentions it casually while the others are playing cards. Because that's how life is, right? It doesn't always wrap up with a nice little bow. So after all of the heartbreak and failure and destruction, the play's final little flicker of hope comes from the person who has lost the most. It's Nina, the seagull herself. She returns having lost everything, her love, her baby, her career, but she hasn't lost her will. She realizes that the most important thing in art and in life isn't fame or success. It's just the simple, powerful ability to endure. And that's the question Chekhov really leaves us with. He's suggesting that maybe real heroism isn't about grand gestures at all, but about the quiet strength it takes to just keep going, even when all your dreams have been shattered. And it's a question that makes the seagull feel just as raw, honest, and powerful today as it did over 100 years ago.